sometimes sleep is referred to as the vital sign of mental health. That poor sleep is associated with just about every single thing you can think of, from hypertension to obesity to depression, and even associated, as is shown in this slide, with overall increased mortality. In other words, death. So people who have poor sleep are more likely, statistically in small numbers at some ages, to die than other people. So what I have on this graph is a U-shaped curve that shows just the relationship, and actually it's the other way too, so that excessive sleep is associated with poor health as well. But particularly troublesome, I think, is on the light end of the sleep. So you can see that average sleep, good sleep, is 7 to 8 hours a day. I think that's a lot. I'm not aware that there are a lot of studies in MS, but it's my experience that sleep disorders are more common in people with MS than in other groups. And given that that's vitally important, I think that it's a big issue for people with MS to understand. And I'm actually going to focus on some non-medical strategies for managing sleep, and here's why. And I don't need to the bearer of bad news. I mean, I'm sure that there are a lot of people in here who are taking some of these medications. So if you look at, there was a recent study that got in the press, and my guess is if you're taking a sleeping medicine, is probably something you remember because it was so well covered by the press, which is that there were a lot of bad outcomes, again, that increased all-cause mortality with the use of common sleep medications, including the ones that are on the screen here, which are very commonly used in MS. So I would first try to not be alarmist about this and reassure you this is, again, an observational study. And, I actually think it is important that you understand technical things like observational study or interventional study. And this is an observational study, right? So what was the limitation of that? Is this is hypothesis generating, association, which is what observational studies do. This is associated with that. Sleep medications are associated with an increased risk of death. And association is not causation, right? So, but we can't quite dismiss it either. Obviously, if there's a way to manage sleep without these medications, so much the better. Right, so you could actually, it's a good exercise for you to begin thinking about, okay, this is an observational study. What are the potential problems, right? So if there's an increased risk of death using sleep medications, right, well, okay, maybe people with congestive heart failure use sleep medications more than people who don't use sleep medications, and maybe that's the reason, or other ill effects, stress, depression. And it would be kind of nice if this study were so easily dismissed as, okay, well, stressed out people with poor health or chronic medical problems take sleep medications. But it's really not. They had great statisticians involved in this. And in using tools that I don't understand, they said, well, we're going to account for CHF. We're going to account for 16 different chronic diseases. And still, there's this relationship. So it's a tough study to take in. So, I want to be clear too. It's like it's a sort of a, I guess it's a Hobson's choice. So on the one hand, if you're not getting enough sleep, that's associated with a myriad bad outcomes. On the other hand, sleeping medications are potentially associated with bad outcomes. What's a person to do? And I think that sometimes you have to use sleep medications. But hopefully the handouts that I have are some suggestions for doing that. There's something called sleep hygiene, and then there are also some dietary supplements listed there. And we're going to kind of quickly go through what sleep hygiene is, and quickly go through most important dietary supplements for improving sleep. So, so here are the key points of that study that I was talking about, right? So the bad news is right up front. There are 4 times the mortality as people in similar situations, right? They tried to take out the obvious things like depression and congestive heart failure. So we're still left with this association and what to do about it. And then there was even there was a dose effect, so the more sleep medications people used, the more likely they were to have a bad outcome, including cancer. And even very few, 18 in a year, was associated with 18 pills a year was associated with a bad outcome. So, and there's the specific information about cancer down there too. So, whoops. Okay, so I'm off of this, but again, so this is an associational study. It doesn't prove that sleeping medications are dangerous, but it at least raises that hypothesis, right?
Do you want to sleep hygiene?
Yes, I do. Actually, I have these.
I'll get it. I'll get it too.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, so 2 ideas, 2 ways to manage sleep without using medications for people who are starting to have sleep problems are the so-called sleep hygiene tips and then the dietary supplements. And so, you know, I want to say that it was kind of funny last night. Of course, I was preparing for this, and I was laying awake, thinking that, thank you, that, you know, it's ironic or hypocritical for me to be talking about this. And I was doing everything right. I was doing what the things we'll go over. I had a dark room. I had no sound. My windows were open. It was nice and cool. And I laid in bed for only 15 or 20 minutes. I got up, and I went back to bed. You know, we'll go over these, but these are the things you're supposed to do. And then I looked, we have a little catwalk in our house, and I looked down, and my wife, who's a nurse practitioner, and who was on call, was the phone was ringing about once every hour. The light was on, the TV was on, and she was laying on the couch with one leg on the floor, sort of twisted, and she was fast asleep. So I'm sure it seems like some people have this ability to sleep well, and others really struggle, despite using sleep hygiene. But these are proven strategies here, and some people will have been through them already, but absolutely you should try these before you try a sleep medication. Although the sleep medication, that's nice. Oh, take a pill, problem solved. Well, you may need to take a pill, but it'd be a mistake not to try behavioral things first. So, for example, you're supposed to go to bed and wake up at the same time each day, and it's probably more important to wake up at the same time each day. So, after a while, you know, so to the extent possible, if you're having trouble with sleep, try not to vary on the weekends. If you're 7 o'clock is your wake up time, wake up at 7 o'clock. Even if you go to bed a little later that night. But try to go to bed at the same time every time. And then this is what I was talking about, creating the comfortable sleep environment, right? So for most people, a cool room is better for sleeping than a warm room. Light is detrimental to sleep, of course. So there are ways, of course, there's those blinds you can wear, or of course, just make sure your shades are drawn. Even little things, blinking lights, like on toothbrushes now, or alarm clocks, turn them away. So pitch black is better. Noise, obviously, bad for sleep. So a lot of times you can't really do anything about that. Maybe you live someplace where there's somebody above you making noise. Well, there's white noise or just simply fans. So if you buy, like an air filter or something, it just kind of runs and hums in the background. It can really be useful in drowning out the other noise that's distracting. An excellent idea is to try tapes of things like the ocean, for example. Music, as long as it's not music with words. Of course, comfort. And then there's the way it's usually described is that the bed is for 2 purposes: sleep and sex. And the major tip that people should take home from this, and it has nothing to do with sex, is that if you're laying in bed and watching TV, bad idea. So you're supposed to develop a reflex of falling asleep. So it should be simple. Right? You lay down, it's unlike anything else, it's unlike exercise. You can't work harder at it. It's just you have to reestablish that reflex. So laying down means falling asleep. Laying in bed means going to bed. So don't you watch TV if you want to, read a book, but don't do it in bed. And then if you're laying in bed, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 minutes is what most of these sleep hygiene tips recommend. I think that's a little short. So you're supposed to get out of bed if you're not falling asleep in 15 or 30 minutes, I say. Get up, go read a book, or make a cup of calming tea or something like that. Don't lay in bed and fret about the problem of not sleeping because, of course, that makes it worse. So to tie in, of course, what Jeff was saying, exercise, excellent for sleep. There's actually a time of day that's best for exercise. It's in the middle for purposes of sleep. That's right in the middle of the day. Exercising right before bed might be disruptive for sleep. Hate to ever say don't exercise, but if you can manage that earlier in the day, probably improves sleep.
Like what?
And then, of course, booze, terrible for sleep. And, you know, if you're going to drink in the morning. because you have to keep in mind that it's not only the quality of sleep that matters. Sorry, it's not only the quantity of sleep that matters, just the 8 hours or 7 hours, but it's the quality of sleep. There's a lot going on in sleep in your brain, right? There's REM sleep, there's deep stages of sleep, and you're cycling between those. And one of the problems with wine or other alcohol is that it disrupts that. So even if you could sleep with wine, which most people can't, or other alcohol, you're altering the architecture, as they say, of sleep. And chronically, if for heavy drinkers, especially at night, that change persists. Now it can come back after people stop drinking, but not for many months, 6 months or a year. Of course, cigarettes are stimulants. You shouldn't be smoking anyway. But, and then to establish a routine, so making a warm cup of tea every night, having a ritual, a positive, healthy ritual, probably a good idea. We have the sleepy time tea on this as one of the, on the other sheet for herbs that will help people go to sleep. I think that's a fantastic one. If you can change out the wine for the sleepy time tea or something, I think that's a major improvement. Certainly, of course, we sort of talked about this, avoid watching the clock. And then it is important to know that it's not always just anxiety. It's not always something that you can easily control through these kinds of behavioral steps. I mean, you may have sleep apnea, right? So especially people who are overweight, very common. And that's, you know, so what does that look like? Well, you can talk to your partner, and your partner says, well, you're breathing, or I hear this kind of slowing down of your breath, and then you stop for a little while and start again. I mean, or snoring a lot. And an overweight person who is snoring, I almost think that's enough right there for a sleep study. So if you can certainly talk to your healthcare provider if simple steps aren't working. I don't think, you know, a couple of nights bad sleep, you can try to work on it on your own. But other than that, you probably should get evaluated. There are other problems, restless leg syndrome, and that can get treated too. So I'm not trying to be glib and think that all sleep problems can be handled with simple steps like this.